It is.
That's my son. So,
I've
for
never-
lack of creativity, we called ourselves Warioba Ventures.
So how old is Warioba Ventures?
So Warioba Venture has been around for about 11 months now. That being said, personally, I've had experience working in Tanzania on and off about 20 years, primarily in technology payments sector. I've worked with the Central Bank of Tanzania, and then I branched out, started working for myself in my previous company, primarily doing software development, advisory on technology, payments platforms, and also project management. I also have a lot of experience in mobile money space. So there's something called mobile money interoperability, which enables mobile money providers to move money real time from one network to the other. I've been involved in developing payment schemes for mobile money interoperability domestically in Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Democratic Republic of Congo, and also cross-border across East Africa. Until 2020, I used to run that previous business, and then during the pandemic, we had to pivot a little bit, understanding what was happening on the ground in the startup ecosystem, the gaps that we saw in terms of accelerating businesses, investment, especially local investment. We set up Warioba Venture, and we've been running since April 2022.
So tell me about some of the gaps that you identified within the startup ecosystem in Tanzania.
So obviously the big one is always capital, right? You go to any ecosystem, people talk like lack of capital is a challenge, and that is obviously one of the issue in startup ecosystem in Tanzania. But for us, what we also found, it's a few other things. So one is the technical expertise. A lot of startups have ideas, they're working on innovation, but they don't have enough technical expertise to see their ideas all the way. There's a lack of mentorship from previous founders, from people who have been successful in the business world. You find an innovator with a very good idea, but the fact that they don't have enough mentors to guide them to go around, it's a challenge. Market knowledge. I might have an idea around the product, but I don't have enough market knowledge to inform me in that product development. And the last part is corporate networks. So for a successful innovation to grow and scale, you need partners. And in Tanzania specifically, a lot of the corporate partners, they might have interest in the startup ecosystem, but they don't understand how to go about it. Similarly, the innovators want to connect to corporates, but they also don't know how to engage them. So, for example, I sit on the board of CRDB Bank, which is one of the largest banks in Tanzania, and you can see that a lot of startups want to engage with CRDB Bank or other banks, institutions, or other financial services, but they just don't know how to navigate that maze. And similarly, it's not like corporates are not interested, but they're just not aware how to engage, how this new asset class will work for them. Innovation is important, but how do you bridge these two different cultures, right? The corporate culture is very different, the startup culture is very different. So we saw all those gaps, and we constantly in our research asked ourselves, there is a role to play here to organize and do better, and obviously let's do it.
So it's interesting that you can find a way to marry all that together. Let me try. Oh, this innovation was not right. It's interesting for me, the gaps and the fact that there's actually people trying to plug in those gaps, because most of the time the onus is usually on the person running the startup to make sure that things are as seamless as possible. But the sort of the model that you're adopting now, is that something that you've seen in other markets?
So the model we are using and what we are trying to build exists in all markets, right? I think the biggest difference for us is we are, for lack of a better word, we are forced to work on everything around us instead of just plugging into ecosystem and other wheels are spinning and you are ready to ride. So if, for example, if I was in Kenya today, where the startup ecosystem is much more developed, and I just wanted to come in as an angel investor, there's plenty of hubs and accelerator programs that have pipeline for me to walk in and invest, right? There's plenty of angel investor networks that I can just be part of and be able to invest with others. I don't have to worry about all these other things, right? Corporates are switched on. They want to engage with startups. You don't have to convince all of that. In our case, we have to do a little bit of heavy lifting because what you have in Tanzania today, in the startup ecosystem, there's not a lot of equity investment from the locals. There are few guys who are doing it. They're doing it quietly. They are doing it one-on-one, not in an organized way that attracts a lot of people, which is great, but at the same time you feel like we are missing to tell the story about Tanzania. So everybody else who's outside Tanzania, Tanzania is a huge country, 60 million people, surrounded by 80 other countries, potential to reach even wider markets in East Africa and Southern Africa, plenty of potential in terms of different industries. But people don't know about us, and the reason they don't know about us is because a lot of these activities are not organized in such a way. So what we are trying to do is few things that are going on. Internally, we are currently running an accelerator program. That is a tailor-made 6-month-long program. We bring in startups, sector agnostic, but you must have technology on your product. You must be post-MVP with the product. You must be post-revenue to prove that your product can actually get traction in the market. It would be nice to make some profit, but we don't fully focus on that. What we try to work on the accelerator is to provide all these, or at least fill in all these gaps that we have identified. Bring in mentors on our accelerator program, or bringing industry experts for market knowledge. We bring in corporates through our corporate partnership program, where we go around to corporates in Tanzania and say, guys, you should be involved in this. You don't understand? Come on board, let's all learn together and understand each other and bridge the cultural gap that is there. We work with startup and fintechs. They apply, we filter them in, they come on board. And we also have our own angel investor network called WV Angel, which is part of Africa Business Angel Network. And through those local angels, after we've gone through 6 months of the program with the startups, we choose to invest into startups that make sense for us. However, we don't just invest ourselves. So we tend to co-invest with others inside Tanzania, outside Tanzania. So there are angel networks in Tanzania that we can collaborate with, or there are angel networks outside Tanzania, here in Kenya, for example, that we also work with. At the same time, we co-invest with the venture capital funds that most of them are not in Tanzania, but are interested in Tanzania. So we are a bridge between the startups that are in Tanzania, and we are also a bridge to the VC funds that are outside. We also work with the startups that are across East Africa, but have an interest to expand to Tanzania. And so for us, that's also important. Not only we believe if there are opportunities, it's good for them to take up on them, but also to challenge the ecosystem in Tanzania, to bring a bit of competition and other players who can plug in and work with them. So that's what we are trying to do. At the moment, at least in the next 2 years, our focus will be in Tanzania, but long term we are East Africa focused. We want to be Africa focused, and we also want to create a local venture capital fund based in Tanzania, investing in Tanzania startups, and also investing in other African startups.
So in the past 11 months, where you have been operational, for lack of a better word, what are some of the achievements that you've had, and what are some of the challenges that have come up?
So on achievement, it's been motivating because I feel like when we started in April last year, and we have learned some of the things along the way, and we've been nimble to pick up the learnings very quickly and act on them. So one, spent a lot of time last year to set up the Accelerator program. Started running in January 2023 for the first 6 months. We've been able to onboard 4 startups which are pretty fresh in Tanzania. One, it's a fintech startup, a cloud-based co-banking software solution for SACCOs and MFI. The other one is in renewable energy. They recycle lithium-ion batteries, create power packs for home usage, for vendor kiosks, guys on the street. We have an agri-tech company looking at end-to-end supply chain for smallholder farmers, supplying them with inputs and everything else, and also being able to link smallholder farmers to the financial services that they need. And the last one is a healthcare B2B supply chain pharmaceutical, supplying pharmaceutical products to the retail pharmacies. So being able to set up an accelerator program, be able to bring on board the 4 startups with potential to grow, scale, tweak their business model, that has been good for us. We have set up an angel investor network from scratch. Right now we've got about 15 local angels who have come on board. The 15 local angels have already put in about our first investment into our first startup, and which is great. So it's a good story that local investors can actually invest into this startup. Significant amount. The deal is still in the pipeline being worked on with the other VC funds, so can't disclose a lot of information right now, but that's been a good positive for us. We've been able to engage with other stakeholders. So come to Tanzania, regulations in this space are still very vague, but we are happy in our existence so far, been able to engage with Central Bank of Tanzania. We've been able to engage with Capital Market and Securities Authority. We are in constant conversations with them on what we are learning, what we feel it's important. They are there, they are listening to us, they are looking to us with questions, which is good because the ecosystem will need regulations to be in place. We've been able to be at the forefront of formation of Tanzania Fintech Association. It's an ongoing process, but it's good because that creates a platform where fintechs can engage with the regulator, can engage among themselves, can engage other stakeholders. We are talking with other stakeholders who are interested in this space in Tanzania, outside Tanzania, on how we can all work together to bring up Tanzania startup ecosystem.
So when you get like the angel network that you're talking about, when you're encouraging investors to come on board and be part of the whole outfit, what particular question are you answering for these angel investors?
So there is plenty of us. One, I'm in technology, so I understand technology, but there's a lot of angels who are curious about technology and where technology is going, and they appreciate what technology can do in day-to-day living and bring impact to our society, right? What we are trying to tell our angels is, one, on a smaller scale to the startups, they lack expertise, they like mentorship, they like corporate networks, but this thing sits with us, right? We are the ones who work in corporates. We know people, we know ourselves, we know who can help set a startup. We're the one with the expertise in different areas, whether it's finance, agriculture, transport, whatever area you're working on. your expertise that can actually help somebody innovate, right? You can mentor people. We've totally been mentoring a lot of people around us. And collectively, if it's a huge group of us, we can do much more of this. We can have much more impact. And we want to change the environment we work with. Right? We want to see our countries be successful. And this is the way for us to contribute back, give back to our communities, and see potential. I mean, I always say to a lot of them that a lot of us have gone through challenging ways to run our own businesses, to become successful, and the best way to give back to the next generation so they don't go through the rough path that we've gone through is to give them the help that they need. Second, on a bigger picture, right? Africa startup ecosystem in the last 5-7 years has become very, very, what I'll say, it stands out across the world, right? A lot of funding has been coming in to African startups, the African ecosystem. But what you realize, even last year in 2022, $4.8 billion funded African startups, but 75% of that went to 4 countries: Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt. The other 50 countries got 25%. There are many reasons for that, but one that is common across, it's the lack of local investment into the startup ecosystem. The foreign investors have an appetite to invest, but they don't know our markets very well. They don't know our challenges very well. What they rely the most, it's the local angels to guide them what works. If the local angels are putting money into a startup and they're investing for equity, that's a great sign to a foreign VC or a foreign private equity guy to say, oh, they've actually put their own money there, so they must have a belief in that business, and they will follow back. So if we don't, as angel investor, invest into our own, nothing will happen, because the foreigners will come, they'll have interest in our countries, the capital will always look for a suitable partner, but they will know who's the suitable partner. And there is a role for angel investors to check that. And that's what we also tell our angel investors, right? We want to invest for equity, we want to invest for return, but if we aggregate our investments into a successful startup, the foreign funds will come. We'll chase those startups, and we get our exits down the road. We can go back and reinvest our returns, and over time, we'll build up the ecosystem.
And I never really thought of it that way. I mean, I know that there has been sort of an interest, so to speak, for Africans to invest in Africa, to build the continent, to just try and get it ahead. But then, let me ask you also now, what we were discussing inside was very interesting for me. What is it among startup founders that you feel needs the most work?
I think at a very early stage, it's less capital and more about expertise, guidance, that those corporate networks that can validate the product makes sense, and building a sustainable business model. So there is a lot of that work that's needed, which is not your cash investment into a business, right? And I think at early stage you need a lot more of that than cash investment into your business, because you want to prove the concept work, you want to prove the product works, and sometimes all it takes is an integration to a partner. All it takes is somebody who has been into that area and warn you, don't waste time doing A, focus on doing B. And focus is very key when you're early stage, right? You don't have a lot of resources, so the fewer resources that you have, you want to focus on a critical mission. And I think that's what they need the most. You need cash injection into your business as you're trying to scale, because then at that time you've perfected the product to one way or another. You need efficiency, you need to get to new markets and things like that. But at early stage, I believe or other things much more than just the capital. And that's what we're trying to work with the startups. They're trying to work. Can we bring all these other good things to you as part of our investment? So to us, investment is not just the small checks that we are cutting in. To us, the investment, it's all the total package that we bring to you. Expertise, if we don't have it internally, do I know somebody else who can help you to, I understand your problem now, I can bring somebody else who can help you to fix it, right? Market knowledge, we have it, we share. We don't know, we can call someone, because in our network, somebody knows somebody else to do it, right? So, and that's what we are trying to do.
So you mean small checks or big checks?
So we have all small checks, but because it's plenty of us, we aggregate them. They tend to be big. In our market, if you cut somebody else a check of $100,000, $150,000, plus you're giving them expertise, knowledge, and all these other things, it can be significant for an early stage startup. And we tend to be part of the process. So it's not just like, yeah, we are investing, sitting on the corner, see you in 6 months, tell us what. We won't get into the kitchen, but we will always be there for help. If you need us, one phone call away, we bring the support you need.
So let me ask you, in your interactions so far, and I guess you being in the industry a lot longer than that, what are some of the limiting mental barriers that exist among startups and investors?
So I think on startups, and I'm specifically speaking about the second tier markets here, it's just that there's always something you learn when you see somebody else has done it, right? And you find in countries like Tanzania, until recently, we didn't have the likes. Now we're starting to get these examples. Tanzanian startups that are successful, they've raised money abroad, a significant amount of money to scale, right? So until 2 or 3 years ago, the likes of Nala or Ramani were not there. And if you're a Tanzanian startup, who do you look up to? There was not much, right? So we're trying to say, be ambitious, right? Think big. Try to get out of your comfort zone. Try to build a product that can scale. And scaling to us is not just getting off Dar Es Salaam and being in Tanzania. Scaling for us means get out of Tanzania, at least be in East Africa, right? And the neighboring countries. So let's build a product that can scale, that can attract more funding, that can have impact into our communities in society.
Okay. That's pretty cool. So there's 2 last questions I have. One, I would like to ask about when we trade across African countries, what are some of the barriers that you've noticed that you feel need to be eliminated? That's one. But maybe we can answer that, then I can go to the next.
So on trade barriers, the common suspect regulations. You've got 54 countries, each with different regulations. Language can be a barrier. English, French, Portuguese, Arabic, and those bring different cultural norms to things. Payment systems. I think until last time I checked, 70% of intra-Africa trade payments have to get outside Africa and come back, right? So payments are made in USD, US dollar, in euros, in British pounds, and they're being processed outside Africa. So I'm in Tanzania. If I have to pay somebody in Democratic Republic of Congo, there's a high chance that payment goes outside Africa and comes back to Congo, right? And that adds cost. Small businesses, huge part of our informal sector, a huge part of our economies, right? And then trying to formalize those and make them be able to trade across Africa is challenging, right? Sometimes you have products that are produced in Tanzania or Kenya, they can be used in Central Africa or Southern Africa, but just bringing all of that into perspective, it's a bit challenging. And glad you've got Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement, you've got all these institutional organizations that are working to bridge and close the barriers. We've got our regional groupings like East Africa Community trying to close down the barriers. But we make progress. It takes time. You wish it could be a little bit more faster. But bringing down those barriers also open up opportunities for the startup ecosystem that you're working on, right? They can scale quickly. They can reach other countries quickly. And we'll see.
Okay, last question. What has your interaction been with, actually maybe there's two.
Yeah.
One, what your interaction has been with ABAN.
Yes.
And then second, we can talk about what your interaction has been with Catalytic Africa.
So ABAN has been great for us, right? We knew ABAN for the last 2-3 years when we were doing our research before we kicked off. When we kicked off last year, I reached out to them, told them what we are trying to do. And it was just instant collaboration, I would say, because as ABAN, they're championing angel investment across Africa. They are very eager and keen to work in what we call second-tier markets in Africa to champion angel investment. So our presence was like an instant welcome from them. We've been part of the organization. Our angel network, WV Angel, is part of ABAN community. We are working with them. Obviously, they're helping us as well, just in terms of understanding the lay of the land as angel investors, because we are learning as we are building up. So in terms of just capacity building, this is how other angel networks have been doing. This is the things that you can learn. They're very quick to share. We are our forward accelerator. It's going to be part of AfriLabs, which is a network built and supported by ABAN as well. So there's a lot of collaboration, peer learning, networking that we are getting from them. Obviously, through Catalytic Africa Matching Grant Fund, when our angel network invests into a startup, or ABAN do or come in and match to a certain amount our investments. So that is also great because we are giving the startup much more to work with. So we love impact funding, or we love matching grants because they are aligned on the commercial terms to the startups in terms when you invest, and they are forcing startups to build up a business to be able to get a matching grant. So for us, being with ABAN, working with ABAN has been very good. We're looking forward to continue working on it, especially on angel investment education, being part of advocating angel investment education to angel investors across Tanzania and public awareness, but also being able to engage government policymakers on the whole topic about angel investment and how can we catalytically improve that in our countries. So they are great partners to have. We are appreciative of the support we've received so far and looking forward to work with them much more.
Have you managed to register onto the Catalytic Africa?
Yes, and as I said before, we've made our first investment. We are into Catalytic Africa process right now for matching grant on our investment, which is pretty cool, right? So they tell you invest first. When you invest first, come to us, we look at it, we are good, we do our compliance, then we'll match the grant. And I think on a bigger scale, that's the model we can scale across our countries, right? Even our governments can pick up on that model because it just incentivizes more angel investments. Imagine if our governments would set up a budget on the side for startup ecosystem, because when you invest into startup, you're investing into youth, you're investing into women, underserved communities, right? You're championing innovation. To your own problems within a country, you are creating employment. So imagine if our government had said, you know what, if angel investors in our countries invest into startup and we see results, we'll also be able to match. At the end of the day, the problem that innovators are trying to solve are in agriculture, healthcare, education, financial services, transport, things that touch majority of people in our communities. So looking forward to do more of these Catalytic Africa matching grants.
It's interesting, like the way you mentioned, when you invest in startups and you're, helping the youth, you're helping women as well.
Yeah.
Don't men feel left out?
They do, but it's at the end of the day, they're all beneficiary of the services, right? So I'm not saying that we should only focus investing in women, but the reality is they're underserved communities, they are left out. So as we are bringing up everyone else, let's put a little bit more emphasis on women and youth. For our perspective, that's not the only criteria. So we have that angle, but we want to invest for equity. We don't segregate and say you should only be this type of business, but we understand if you are going to have impact in a community, at the end of the day, you touch women and youth who are much more left out.
I like that, especially because it's Women's Month.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if it's redundant, but whenever we have Women's Month, I never really know personally how to focus on the whole topic. But I think this particular year, it's about technology and information and how I guess that can be leveraged to elevate the living standards of women across Africa. So parting shot, what would you tell an investor or a startup in Tanzania? Why should they engage with you?
So investor and startup. So I'll start with an investor. And are you asking about foreign investor or local investor?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. So what we are telling investors, right? There's a plenty of potential in Tanzania. And as I said earlier also, when you look at Tanzania is a huge country. 60 million people will continue to increase. So the market is going to be there, right? I think the projections in terms of population in Africa puts Tanzania in the next 20, 50 years to be up there, like top 3, 4 countries in terms of population. So the market will continue to be there. But also Tanzania is a gateway to East Africa community. We are bordered by, of course, Kenya has got its own access to ocean. Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Congo, all border Tanzania, right? Then you stretch to the Southern Africa part and the whole SADC community. Malawi, in Zambia, border Tanzania. It's also a gateway to Zimbabwe and other countries. There's plenty of trade going on between all these 7, 8 countries with Tanzania. So when you actually invest in Tanzania, you're not only investing in Tanzania, you are investing to also potentially these other countries. And then for investors who don't know Tanzania very well, that's why we are here for, right? We know Tanzania very well. We understand the market. We understand the corporates. We have the networks to enable when you come in and you work with us. And because we can offer advice, but we are also investors. We are all in it together. So we are both working to get the same results back. So that's what we are telling investors. And come work through us, and we will all work and increase the pie size. To the startups, similarly, we are your gateway, right? We can add value right away, your early stage. But I think the most important part is also to open up that door for future investments, right? Our first investment can easily shape your product, make it work quickly, get more traction and things like that, and scale. But I think the fundamental question is also we are bringing other investors to invest in you for your future and for your scaling. And I think that's very important.